Sometimes the shortest message carries the deepest wound, especially when it comes from someone who shares your last name. I had just finished loading the cooler into the back of our SUV when my phone buzzed. It was Father's Day, the kind of Sunday that usually smelled like fresh coffee, backyard barbecue, and memories people wanted to keep. My wife Sarah was inside the house packing homemade potato salad while our 8-year-old daughter, Emma, carefully carried a card she had spent 3 evenings making for her grandfather. She had covered it with bright markers, uneven hearts, and a handwritten sentence that read, "Happy Father's Day, Grandpa. I love you." She could barely wait to hand it to him herself. I smiled as I looked toward the front window where she proudly held up the card for her mother to admire. For one brief moment, everything felt normal. Then I unlocked my phone. The message was from my older brother, David. I expected another reminder to bring ice or pick up extra hamburger buns like he usually did whenever our family gathered. Instead, I read words that instantly drained every ounce of excitement from the morning. "Do not bring your family today. We are sick of you." I stared at the screen, convinced I had misunderstood. I read it again, then a third time. The words never changed. There was no joke waiting at the end, no explanation, no smiling emoji softening the blow. Just one sentence that landed with the weight of years I had spent pretending everything between us was fine. Sarah walked outside carrying a tray of brownies wrapped in aluminum foil. She immediately noticed my expression. "Michael," she asked quietly, "what happened?" I tried to answer, but the words caught somewhere between disbelief and embarrassment. Instead, I handed her my phone. She read the message slowly before looking back at me with the same stunned expression I imagined was on my own face. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Emma skipped out the front door wearing the little yellow dress she insisted was lucky because Grandpa once said it reminded him of sunshine. She smiled at both of us without realizing anything had changed. "Are we leaving now?" she asked happily. I forced myself to smile back. "Give Daddy just 1 minute, sweetheart." She nodded and climbed into the back seat, carefully placing the handmade card beside her as though it were something precious. Sarah gently rested one hand on my arm. "You do not have to go," she whispered. "Not if they are going to treat you like this." Her words were kind, but they awakened memories I had spent years trying to ignore. David had always been the favorite. When we were kids, teachers praised us both, yet somehow his accomplishments became family stories while mine disappeared before dinner was over. If I earned second place, everyone talked about how hard David had worked to finish first in something else. If I received a promotion, the conversation somehow shifted toward David's latest investment or new business idea. I learned long ago that competing for attention inside my own family was a game I could never win. Still, I kept showing up. Birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Father's Day. I convinced myself that consistency mattered more than recognition. Maybe one year things would feel different. Maybe one conversation could repair what decades had quietly damaged. Looking at David's message, I wondered if I had been fooling myself all along. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I started typing 3 different replies before deleting every one of them. Nothing I wrote sounded right. Anger felt too easy. Silence felt too painful. Before I could decide what to do, my phone vibrated again. This time it was not another text. It was a phone call. The screen displayed the name of the local hospital where my father had volunteered every Father's Day morning for nearly 15 years. I looked at Sarah. She looked back at me, concern replacing confusion. A strange feeling settled over me, the kind that appears just before life changes direction without asking permission. I answered the call, and the calm voice on the other end immediately told me that everything I thought this day was going to be had just disappeared. The woman on the other end of the line spoke with the calm, practiced voice of someone who delivered difficult updates every day. She explained that my father had suddenly become dizzy while helping set up tables for the hospital's annual Father's Day appreciation breakfast. It was not described as a life-threatening emergency, but the volunteers wanted a family member to come because he insisted on leaving before the doctors finished evaluating him. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat frozen behind the steering wheel. Sarah watched my face carefully. "Is your dad all right?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "They think he will be okay. They just want someone there." She reached across the center console and squeezed my hand. "Then we should go." I looked down at David's message still glowing on my phone. The words felt even colder now. "Do not bring your family today. We are sick of you." It was hard to believe those sentences had arrived only a minute before the hospital called. One message pushed me away while another reminded me that family responsibilities did not disappear simply because someone wanted me gone. Emma leaned forward from the back seat. "Is Grandpa sick?" she asked softly. Children always seem to notice more than adults gave them credit for. I turned around and offered the gentlest smile I could manage. "He is not feeling his best, sweetheart. We are going to check on him." She hugged the handmade card against her chest. "Then he definitely needs this today." Her simple confidence made my throat tighten. She had no idea how complicated adults could make something as simple as showing love. As I pulled out of the driveway, memories began filling the silence inside the car. Growing up, David had never needed to compete for attention. He naturally occupied the center of every room. Teachers praised his confidence. Coaches admired his leadership. Neighbors remembered his accomplishments years later. I was different. I preferred fixing things in the garage with my father, helping neighbors carry groceries, or quietly finishing projects without expecting applause. Somewhere along the way, those differences became labels. David was called ambitious. I became dependable. He was celebrated. I was appreciated only when someone needed help. It was never openly cruel. There were no dramatic arguments or explosive confrontations during our childhood. Instead, there were hundreds of tiny moments that slowly built invisible walls between us. If both of us arrived for dinner at the same time, everyone asked David about his latest plans before noticing I was even there. When I started my own small home renovation business, my mother smiled politely before changing the subject to David's expanding investment company. Even my father rarely interrupted those conversations. He never seemed intentionally dismissive. He simply remained quiet, as though avoiding conflict had become easier than recognizing it. Sarah had noticed the pattern years before I admitted it to myself. After our first Thanksgiving together as a married couple, she gently asked, "Has your family always expected you to be the one who adjusts?" At the time, I laughed and told her she was imagining things. Looking back, I realized she had understood my family better after one holiday than I had after 3 decades. She never tried to pull me away from them. Instead, she encouraged me to keep believing people could change. That hope was one of the reasons I loved her. The hospital came into view just beyond a row of maple trees shimmering in the summer sunlight. The parking lot was busier than usual because of the holiday event, with volunteers carrying balloons and gift bags toward the entrance. Everything looked cheerful, almost festive, making the heaviness in my chest feel strangely out of place. Before getting out of the vehicle, I glanced one more time at David's message. For the first time, something about it felt wrong. Not simply cruel, but unusual. David could be arrogant. He could be dismissive. He could even be painfully blunt. Yet he almost always explained himself, especially when our father was involved. This message contained nothing except rejection. No reason. No context. No follow-up. I locked the phone, slipped it into my pocket, and helped Emma climb out of the back seat. She carefully held her handmade card with both hands, as though protecting something priceless. We had come expecting to celebrate Father's Day. Instead, I had the unsettling feeling that before this afternoon was over, I was finally going to discover why my family had spent so many years pretending everything was normal when clearly it had never been. Inside the emergency observation area, I found my father sitting upright on a hospital bed with a blood pressure cuff still wrapped around his arm. He looked tired more than anything else, frustrated by the attention rather than frightened by what had happened. The moment Emma spotted him, she hurried over and carefully handed him the handmade Father's Day card she had protected all morning. His face softened in a way I had not seen for years. He opened the card slowly, reading every word as though it deserved his full attention. When he looked up again, his eyes were slightly watery. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said quietly. "This is the best gift I have received today." Emma smiled proudly and wrapped her arms around him. Watching them together reminded me that beneath all the awkward family dynamics, my father genuinely loved his granddaughter. Sarah stepped forward and placed the container of brownies on the nearby table. "We brought these for the family lunch," she said with a warm smile. I guess the timing changed a little. My father managed a small laugh before rubbing his forehead. Nothing ever goes exactly as planned. A nurse entered briefly, reviewed his chart, and explained that his test results looked encouraging. His blood pressure had stabilized, and the dizziness appeared to have been caused by dehydration after spending several hours outside, helping volunteers prepare for the event. She encouraged him to drink more water, rest for the afternoon, and schedule a follow-up appointment with his primary physician during the coming week. As soon as she left, the room grew quiet again. I reached into my pocket and looked once more at David's message. I still could not make sense of it. My father noticed the expression on my face. "Something is bothering you," he said. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect him from unnecessary stress, especially after the morning he had just experienced. Another part of me was tired of pretending everything was normal. Without saying a word, I handed him my phone. He adjusted his reading glasses and stared at the screen longer than I expected. His eyebrows slowly came together. He read the message again before lowering the phone onto the blanket covering his lap. "David sent this," he asked quietly. "About 20 minutes before the hospital called," I answered. My father remained silent. That silence bothered me almost as much as the message itself. He did not look surprised. He looked disappointed. There was a difference. Sarah noticed it too. She gently asked, "Did something happen before today that we do not know about?" My father leaned back against the pillow and let out a long breath. "There have been disagreements," he admitted. "More than I realized." That answer only created more questions. "Disagreements about what?" I asked. Before he could respond, his own phone began ringing on the bedside table. The screen displayed David's name. My father looked at it without moving. The phone rang until it stopped. A few seconds later it rang again. He still did not answer. Finally, it became silent. I could not ignore the growing feeling that everyone except me already understood a story I had never been allowed to hear. My father slowly picked up the phone, unlocked it, and opened what appeared to be a family group conversation. His expression changed almost immediately. Confusion replaced disappointment. He scrolled upward, then downward, reading carefully before looking back at me. "This does not make sense," he murmured. "Your message is not here." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned the screen toward me. The most recent message in the family group simply reminded everyone to arrive around noon and bring extra folding chairs if they had them. There was nothing remotely similar to the text I had received. My father looked genuinely puzzled. "David has been sending updates here all morning," he said. "Why would he send you something completely different?" Sarah and I exchanged a glance. The question echoed inside my mind. If David had wanted to embarrass me, why send a private message instead of confronting me directly? And if he truly wanted to keep me away, why had he never mentioned it in front of anyone else? I unlocked my own phone again and opened the conversation. The message was still there exactly as I remembered it, unchanged and impossible to misunderstand. Yet somehow, it already felt like only one piece of a much larger puzzle. As my father slowly handed my phone back to me, he said something so quietly that I almost missed it. "Michael, I think someone wants you to believe our family has already given up on you, and I am no longer certain that person is telling the truth." My father insisted that he felt strong enough to leave the hospital after the nurse completed the discharge instructions, but before we walked out, he asked if he could speak with me alone for a minute. Sarah understood immediately and took Emma to the hospital cafe to find a cold lemonade while giving us some privacy. The room became unusually quiet after they left. My father looked older than he had only an hour earlier, not because of the medical scare, but because something heavier seemed to be resting on his mind. He folded Emma's Father's Day card and slipped it carefully into the inside pocket of his jacket as though he wanted to keep it close. "I owe you an apology," he said at last. I frowned. "For what?" He looked toward the window before answering. "For believing that keeping peace was the same thing as doing what was right." Those words stayed with me because they described our family better than anything I had ever heard. He admitted that over the years he had noticed small moments when conversations drifted away from me, when invitations arrived through David instead of directly to me, and when family decisions somehow happened without my knowledge. He had convinced himself those were harmless misunderstandings that would eventually work themselves out. Instead, every year another brick had quietly been added to a wall separating us. "I thought time would fix it," he admitted. Instead, silence made it worse. I did not know how to respond. Hearing him acknowledge the distance between us brought relief, but it also made me wonder how long he had been carrying those thoughts without saying them aloud. Before either of us could continue, Linda hurried into the room, carrying her purse and car keys, clearly anxious after receiving news about the hospital visit. She rushed over and hugged my father before asking a dozen questions about how he felt. Once she realized he was going to be fine, her shoulders relaxed. Then she noticed me standing beside the bed. "Michael," she said with genuine warmth, "I was wondering why you had not arrived at the house yet." I searched her face for any sign that she knew about David's message. There was none. My father quietly handed her my phone. She read the text once, then looked at me with complete disbelief. "I have never seen this before," she said firmly. "David never mentioned anything like this." She immediately reached for her own phone and opened the family conversation. It matched my father's exactly. Friendly reminders about the lunch. A photo of the decorated backyard. My mother's request for someone to remember the extra folding chairs. Nothing else. She looked genuinely shaken. "This is not how today was supposed to begin," she whispered. As we walked together toward the hospital entrance, I noticed several missed calls from David that had appeared while my father was being discharged. There were also 2 voice messages. That surprised me even more because David rarely left voice messages for anyone. I pressed play, expecting another argument. Instead, all I heard was his hurried voice saying, "Michael, where are you? Dad is asking about you. Please call me back as soon as you hear this." The second message sounded even more anxious. "I do not know why you are not answering. Something is wrong. Just call me." I stopped walking. Sarah and Emma had just returned from the cafe, and they immediately noticed my expression. Sarah listened to both messages beside me. "That does not sound like someone who wants you to stay away," she said quietly. She was right. The urgency in David's voice did not match the cruelty of the text message I had received. One of them had to be false, or there was an explanation none of us had discovered yet. My father slowly shook his head. "We are all going to the house together," he said with unexpected determination. "Nobody is leaving anyone behind." Today, during the drive across town, the atmosphere inside our 2 vehicles felt strangely tense despite the bright summer afternoon outside. Emma talked excitedly about giving Grandpa another hug once everyone reached the family gathering, completely unaware of the questions filling the minds of every adult around her. When we finally turned onto the familiar street where my parents had lived for more than 30 years, I immediately noticed something unusual. Several relatives were standing in the front yard instead of enjoying the backyard barbecue. They were looking toward the driveway as though they had been waiting for someone to arrive. The moment David saw my vehicle pull in behind our parents' car, he broke away from the group and hurried toward me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not anger. It was not annoyance. It was unmistakable relief, and before I could even step out of the driver's seat, he said the last words I expected to hear from him. "Michael, thank goodness you came. I have been trying to figure out who sent that message all afternoon." For a long moment, I simply stared at David, searching his face for any sign that this was another cruel joke. Instead of confidence, I saw exhaustion. Instead of arrogance, I saw genuine worry. He walked closer and lowered his voice before anyone else could hear us. "I swear I never sent that message," he said. "The second mom called and asked why you had not answered anyone. I checked my phone. The conversation with you was gone." I slowly pulled my phone from my pocket and showed him the text that had changed the entire day. His eyes widened. "That is not possible," he whispered. "Look at my phone." He unlocked his device and opened our message thread. The last thing he had sent me the previous week was a simple reminder about our father's favorite pie. There was no Father's Day text. No rejection. No argument. Nothing. We stood beside our vehicles comparing timestamps, contacts, and message histories while the rest of the family watched from the front yard with growing curiosity. Even the contact information matched perfectly. Somehow my phone contained a message that did not exist on his. Sarah quietly joined us while Emma ran ahead to give another hug to her grandparents. She listened carefully as David explained everything he had done since learning I had disappeared that morning. He had called repeatedly because our father kept asking why I was late. When I never answered, everyone assumed I had been delayed by traffic until the hospital called about our father. After that, nobody had time to think about anything except making sure he was all right. My mother invited everyone inside before the afternoon became even more uncomfortable. The backyard looked exactly as I remembered from every Father's Day during my childhood. The old maple tree still shaded the picnic table. The familiar charcoal grill filled the air with the smell of burgers and grilled corn. Children laughed while chasing bubbles across the lawn, completely unaware that the adults were quietly carrying questions much heavier than the holiday itself. We gathered around the patio table with glasses of iced tea while my father asked everyone to sit down before lunch. He looked from one face to another and spoke more directly than I had heard in years. Before we celebrate today, I think our family needs to clear up something important. The conversation stopped immediately. He explained that I had received a message telling me not to come, and that both he and my mother believed someone needed to explain how such a thing could happen. My cousins exchanged confused looks. An aunt quietly shook her head. Nobody seemed to recognize the message. David stood first. "I want everyone here to know that I did not send it," he said firmly. "If I had a problem with my brother, I would tell him to his face. I would never say something like that about Sarah or Emma." Hearing those words surprised me because they sounded completely sincere. Then my cousin Rachel slowly raised her hand. "Can I ask something?" she said. "Has anyone else received strange messages lately?" Several people looked at one another. Rachel explained that 2 weeks earlier she had received a text that appeared to come from her mother criticizing her parenting. They argued for nearly a day before, discovering her mother had never written it. Another cousin admitted he had received a message from an uncle canceling a fishing trip, only to learn later that no such message had ever been sent. The table became unusually quiet as everyone realized these incidents were connected. My father frowned deeply. "Why has nobody mentioned this before?" Rachel gave an embarrassed smile. "Because we all thought it was just a phone glitch or a misunderstanding." Sarah looked toward me. "What if it was never random?" she asked softly. "What if someone wanted family members to stop trusting each other?" That possibility settled over the table like a heavy cloud. I looked around at the people I had known my entire life. Suddenly, years of awkward conversations, missed invitations, unexplained distance, and quiet resentment no longer seemed like isolated moments. They began to resemble pieces of a pattern none of us had recognized while living through it. My father slowly reached into his pocket and unfolded Emma's handmade Father's Day card once more. He looked at the colorful words before lifting his eyes to the rest of the family. "One false message nearly kept my son, my daughter-in-law, and my granddaughter away from this house today," he said quietly. "If we do not discover who is behind this, the next message could tear this family apart for good." At that exact moment, my phone vibrated once again. The sender appeared as David, but before I even opened it, every instinct inside me warned that whatever appeared on the screen was about to change everything we thought we understood. Every conversation around the patio table stopped the instant my phone vibrated. For a second, nobody moved. Even the children laughing in the backyard seemed far away as I looked down at the screen. The sender once again appeared to be David. My pulse quickened as I opened the message, expecting another insult or another attempt to drive us apart. Instead, the screen displayed only 6 words. "Check Dad's old email account now." I slowly turned the phone toward David. "Did you send this?" He immediately shook his head. "No, I have been sitting right here." He even held up his own phone too. Proof he had not touched it. My father leaned forward. "What old email account?" My mother answered before anyone else could. "The one you stopped using years ago." The address connected to the old desktop computer in the study. My father frowned as though he had almost forgotten it existed. "I have not logged into that account in at least 5 years." Something about the message felt different from the first one. The earlier text had been cruel and divisive. This one sounded almost urgent, as though someone wanted us to discover something instead of hiding it. My father stood slowly. "Let us see what is there." We all walked inside together. The familiar hallway felt strangely different now that every family member seemed to be searching for answers instead of avoiding uncomfortable conversations. My father's old study had barely changed over the years. Shelves filled with history books lined one wall, family photographs covered another, and an aging desktop computer still sat on the oak desk exactly where I remembered it from high school. Dust covered the monitor, proving nobody had used it in a very long time. My father pressed the power button. The computer slowly came to life with a soft humming sound. It took several minutes before the login screen appeared. Surprisingly, he still remembered the password. "Some habits never disappear," he joked quietly, though nobody laughed. After opening the old email account, we expected to find nothing more than forgotten newsletters and outdated receipts. At first, that was exactly what appeared. Then my mother noticed a folder simply labeled Family. "I do not remember creating that," she said. My father clicked on it. Inside were dozens of saved emails dating back almost 8 years. None of us recognized them because they had never appeared in the family group messages or our regular inboxes. The earliest messages were small misunderstandings. One appeared to come from me declining a Thanksgiving invitation I had happily attended. Another looked as though David had criticized our mother's birthday dinner, even though he had been the one who organized it. As we continued reading, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every email contained subtle words capable of creating disappointment, resentment, or hurt feelings without causing a dramatic confrontation. Someone had carefully planted quiet misunderstandings over many years. Sarah slowly looked around the room. "That explains everything," she whispered. "Not one huge argument, just hundreds of tiny fractures." My father lowered himself into the desk chair, visibly overwhelmed. "All these years," he said softly, "I thought our family was naturally drifting apart." My mother wiped away a tear, and I blamed myself for not keeping everyone close. David leaned over my shoulder, reading another message that falsely claimed I was too busy to attend our parents' anniversary dinner several years earlier. I remembered that evening clearly because I had never received the invitation. I had spent years believing they simply forgot to include me. They, meanwhile, believed I had chosen not to come. Suddenly, dozens of painful memories rearranged themselves into a completely different story. We had all been reacting to conversations that had never actually happened. Emma quietly stepped into the doorway holding the empty Father's Day card envelope she had been carrying around all afternoon. "Grandpa," she asked innocently, "why would somebody want families to stop loving each other?" Nobody answered immediately because none of us knew how to explain something so complicated to an 8-year-old. Finally, my father stood, walked over to her, and gently rested his hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes people forget that trust is easier to break than to rebuild," he said softly. "But today we are going to start rebuilding it." Just as he finished speaking, another notification appeared on the computer screen. It was not an old message this time. It was a brand new email arriving in real time from an address none of us recognized. The subject line contained only one sentence: "You are finally asking the right questions." None of us spoke for several seconds after the new email appeared on the screen. My father slowly moved the mouse and opened the message while everyone gathered behind him. There was no greeting, no signature, and no threatening language. The email contained only a few carefully written sentences. "If you are reading this together, then you have finally stopped blaming one another. You have spent years searching for the wrong problem because the messages were never the real story. The real story is who believed them without asking questions." At the bottom was a single attachment titled Family Timeline. My father hesitated before opening it. A spreadsheet appeared listing dates that stretched back nearly a decade. Every entry matched a family gathering, holiday, birthday, graduation, anniversary, or reunion. Next to each event was a short description of a false message or misleading email that had quietly created confusion before that occasion. As we scrolled farther down, the pattern became undeniable. Every misunderstanding that had slowly pushed our family apart had been documented with astonishing precision. Sarah quietly whispered, "Whoever made this knew every important date in your family's life." David leaned closer to the monitor. "Look at the last column." Beside each fake message was another note describing the expected reaction. One line read, "Michael will probably stay home." Another predicted, "David will assume Michael ignored the invitation." Yet another said, "Parents will believe both sons need space." The accuracy was unsettling because every prediction had come true. My mother slowly covered her mouth. "Someone has been studying us." My father continued scrolling until he reached the newest entry. The date matched today's Father's Day gathering. The note beside it read, "Final separation attempt. Probability of permanent family division, high." Nobody said a word. Emma stood quietly beside Sarah, sensing the seriousness without fully understanding it. Finally, David broke the silence. This was planned. His voice was calm but firm. Not for one day, for years. I looked back through the document and noticed another column labeled Outcome. The earlier entries all contained simple comments such as successful, partial success, or delayed. Today's row was different. Instead of an outcome, it displayed one sentence. "Family reunited unexpectedly." My father slowly leaned back in his chair. "That means whoever sent this expected you to stay away today." I nodded. If the hospital had not called, I probably would have turned around and gone home. Sarah reached for my hand. She knew I was telling the truth. Without that unexpected phone call, Emma never would have delivered her card, my father never would have seen the text, and none of us would have uncovered the hidden emails. David suddenly remembered something and walked toward the bookshelf beside the desk. Dad, do you still have that old wireless router from when you replaced the internet a few years ago? My father looked surprised. I think I saved the box in the basement. Please get it, David replied. The internet company helped one of my clients recover old connection records last year. Sometimes older equipment keeps basic logs longer than people realize. Within minutes, my father returned carrying a dusty cardboard box. The router itself still had a faded label with the installation date. David connected it to the old computer and carefully opened the archived settings. None of us expected much, but one screen immediately caught his attention. It displayed a list of devices that had connected regularly before the router had been retired. Most belonged to family phones and laptops we recognized. One name did not. It appeared hundreds of times over several years. The device identifier had been manually renamed with two simple words. Guest office. My father frowned. We have never had a guest office. David nodded slowly. Exactly. He clicked another menu showing connection history. The unknown device had appeared almost every time our extended family gathered at the house. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Father's Day, birthdays, graduation parties. It connected, remained active for several hours, then disappeared until the next family event. Sarah looked around the room as realization slowly spread across every face. Whoever did this was not watching your family from far away, she said quietly. They were sitting close enough to connect to your home network. The room fell completely silent as each of us instinctively thought about every relative, family, friend, neighbor, volunteer, and familiar face who had attended those celebrations over the years. Then another notification appeared in the email inbox. The sender was the same unknown address, but this time the message contained only one sentence. You already know the person. You simply remember them for all the wrong reasons. The words from the mysterious email echoed through the study long after the notification disappeared. You already know the person. You simply remember them for all the wrong reasons. My father slowly closed the laptop and looked around the room. Nobody rushed to accuse anyone. For the first time all day, we had finally learned the cost of making assumptions. David broke the silence first. If someone wanted us to point fingers, that is exactly what we should not do. My father nodded with quiet approval. Then we start with facts. We carried the old computer into the dining room, so everyone could sit together. My cousins, aunts, and uncles gathered around while Sarah explained everything we had discovered. Instead of reacting with anger, the room filled with thoughtful questions. One by one, everyone began sharing memories that had never made sense until now. My aunt remembered receiving a message years earlier claiming that my mother wanted to cancel Christmas because too many relatives planned to attend. My uncle admitted he once believed David had refused to help him move because of a rude voicemail that he later assumed had been deleted by accident. Rachel recalled the strange text that almost damaged her relationship with her own mother. Every story sounded different, yet everyone carried the same pattern. A message appeared. Feelings were hurt. Nobody verified the information. Trust quietly weakened. Sarah took a sheet of paper and began writing every event in chronological order. The timeline stretched across nearly 10 years. Looking at it together made something stand out that none of us had noticed before. Every false message had arrived shortly before an important family gathering. Never after. Always before. Whoever was responsible did not want dramatic confrontations. They wanted people to stay home, arrive upset, or silently distance themselves from one another. My father studied the list for several minutes before quietly saying, "Who always knew our family schedule months in advance?" Everyone started thinking. My mother suddenly looked toward the hallway. Helen. Several faces turned at once. Helen had been my mother's longtime church friend and volunteer coordinator for community events. For almost 12 years, she had helped organize holiday dinners, birthday celebrations, anniversary parties, and neighborhood gatherings. She often called to confirm guest lists, addresses, and schedule changes because she enjoyed helping families stay connected. None of us had ever questioned it because she seemed genuinely kind. David slowly nodded as memories returned. She was always the first person to ask who was coming and who was not. My aunt added another detail. And whenever somebody missed an event, She somehow already knew the reason before anyone else mentioned it. My father did not immediately accept the conclusion. "That still does not prove anything," he said calmly. "We need evidence, not suspicion." Just then the front doorbell rang. Everyone exchanged surprised looks because we were not expecting additional guests. My cousin walked to the entrance and returned carrying a small padded envelope with no return address. It had been left on the porch only moments earlier. My father carefully opened it. Inside was a flash drive and a folded handwritten note. The handwriting was neat and unfamiliar. The note read, "The truth deserves witnesses, not victims." David inserted the flash drive into the old computer. It contained only one folder labeled Archive. Inside were dozens of exported message logs, email routing records, and screenshots documenting how messages had been altered, redirected, or created using anonymous online services. Each file included timestamps matching the dates on our family timeline. Near the bottom was one final document containing appointment calendars, volunteer schedules, and event planning notes. One name appeared beside nearly every family gathering over the past decade: Helen Morris. Nobody celebrated the discovery. There was only quiet. Sadness because the answer hurt in a completely different way than any of us expected. My mother slowly sat down, staring at the screen. "She used to tell me our family was lucky because everyone cared so much about one another," she whispered. Sarah gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Maybe that is exactly why she knew where to create doubt. My father closed the folder and looked around at every member of the family gathered in the room. "Today is not about judging someone who is not here to speak," he said. "It is about deciding whether we continue believing old misunderstandings or begin believing each other." As everyone quietly nodded, my phone vibrated one final time. The unknown sender had disappeared. In its place was a new message from an ordinary local phone number containing only one sentence. "The complete explanation is waiting inside the blue notebook on the top shelf of your father's study, and it has been there longer than any of you realize." My father climbed onto a small wooden step stool in the study and reached toward the highest shelf where an old blue notebook rested beneath several photo albums. Dust covered the faded cover, making it obvious that nobody had touched it in years. He carefully opened the first page, and before reading a single word, he froze. Tucked inside the front cover was a folded letter written entirely in his own handwriting. He slowly unfolded it and looked around the room. "I remember writing this," he said quietly. "I just never remember putting it here." The letter had been written nearly 9 years earlier after my parents attended a community seminar about online scams and digital identity theft. In it, my father described several strange incidents involving unexpected emails, confusing phone calls, and conversations that different people remembered completely differently. He had planned to begin documenting every unusual event because he feared someone was manipulating communications within the family. However, life became busy, the incidents seemed isolated, and the notebook was eventually forgotten on the shelf. As we continued reading through the pages, we discovered careful notes describing many of the same misunderstandings we had uncovered that afternoon. Every entry ended with the same reminder written in capital letters: "Verify before believing." My father slowly closed his eyes for a moment. If I had remembered this notebook, we might have stopped all of this years ago. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "Maybe," I replied. But today we finally did. Nobody blamed him because every person in the room realized the same mistake had been shared by all of us. We had trusted messages more than conversations. We had believed assumptions more than people. My mother quietly looked toward David and then toward me. "I spent too many years thinking my sons simply grew apart," she whispered. David immediately shook his head. "I thought Michael stopped wanting to be part of the family." I smiled sadly. "I thought everyone had decided there was no place left for us." Sarah squeezed my hand as Emma climbed onto my lap. Still holding the empty envelope from the Father's Day card she had proudly delivered earlier that morning. She looked around at all the adults before asking the same simple question children often ask when they unknowingly solve complicated problems. Why did nobody just ask each other? The room became silent before quiet laughter slowly replaced the tension that had filled the house all day. My father smiled through moist eyes. "That may be the smartest question anyone has asked today." Instead of spending the rest of Father's Day discussing the person who had created so much confusion, our family made a different decision. We would preserve every document, every message, and every record we had discovered and share the information with the appropriate authorities if necessary, but we refused to allow one person's actions to become the final chapter of our family's story. We carried the old computer back into the study, closed the blue notebook, and returned outside where the grill was still warm and the afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the backyard. For the first time in many years, nobody rushed through polite conversations or avoided uncomfortable subjects. David apologized for the distance that had grown between us, and I admitted that I had withdrawn without asking difficult questions because rejection seemed easier to accept than disappointment. My parents apologized for confusing silence with peace. One by one, every member of the family shared a misunderstanding they wished they had addressed years earlier. The stories were different, but the lesson was always the same. Trust survives through honest conversations, not unanswered messages. Before we sat down to eat, my father unfolded Emma's handmade card one more time and placed it in the center of the picnic table where everyone could see it. Beneath the colorful hearts and bright letters, she had written one sentence that suddenly meant far more than any of us realized that morning. Families stay together because they choose love. Nobody could have planned a better ending than that. As the evening drew to a close and we packed leftovers into containers, my phone remained completely silent. No mysterious texts arrived. No anonymous emails appeared. For the first time in a very long time, silence no longer felt like distance. It felt like peace. While helping Emma into the back seat of our vehicle, I looked once more at my parents standing together on the front porch, waving as we pulled away. Father's Day had begun with a message designed to separate us forever. It ended with something far stronger than any anonymous sender had anticipated. We had finally stopped believing every voice that came through a screen and started believing the people standing right in front of us. And that simple choice gave our family a future that years of misunderstanding had almost taken away.